This is a life-changing tool. Most personality typing systems find you where you are based on your behavior, and it identifies you based on your behavior. Enneagram is the only tool I know that you identify with based on motivation. You can't, I don't believe, try to be a healthier or better person by just willing yourself to change your behavior if you haven't looked at why you're motivated to do the things you do.
Hello and welcome to More Than Sunday, a weekly podcast where we take a deeper dive into the stories, themes, and questions of our faith. My name is Julie Richter, and I am the lead pastor to Access, our modern worship community at First United Methodist Church, Richardson. And with me every week is our worship director, Eric Jakowski. Happy October, Eric.
Happy October.
I'm so excited. It's my favorite month.
It's the kickoff of my favorite 3 months. October, November, December is my favorite time of year.
Is that because of weather or holidays?
Yes.
Both.
Yes, both. I love the weather, love the holidays. All of them. Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Just love the season. And for whatever reason, it's kind of ridiculous, but I feel closer to people this time of year, for all of those reasons. And so, just love the time of year.
Okay, so I know that this is going to be embarrassing, but I feel like
Continue.
I have to admit it. Okay, fine. Pumpkin spice latte. I know, you're going to judge me.
No, I'm not. I don't judge. A lot of people like it. I'm not a pumpkin person, nor am I a latte or really a coffee. I like a good cup of coffee.
Do you know there's no actual pumpkin in it? It's a spice.
Yeah. I'm not judging you. A lot of people like it. It's just not for me. It's just not for me.
Thing.
That's right. That's
but
nice.
There's just nothing better, really, for me than a really good, cold fall day where I can put on a comfy jacket and get a pumpkin spice latte. It's just the best.
I understand the concept behind it. All of that is great except the latte for me, but I digress.
Well, speaking of favorites, we have been in a sermon series that's been one of our favorites called Head, Heart, and Hands. And today we get to the last of this 3-week series that is on hands, or what is called the doing triad in this Enneagram language that we've been diving into.
So last week we had a conversation with Suzanne Stabile around heart, or the feeling triad. Suzanne has written a number of books on the Enneagram, and it was a great conversation last week. We are so excited this week to welcome her daughter, Joey Schewee. Joey is an FUMCR member, but also an incredible teacher of the Enneagram and practitioner of the Enneagram, and falls into that doing triad, that hands triad that we're talking about. So we're really excited to talk to Joey. We are here with Joey Schewee. Joey is the Vice President of Admissions, Financial Aid, and Alumni at JP2, John Paul II, a private high school here in the Dallas area. And she also is an Enneagram teacher with Life in the Trinity Ministry, which is a resource that this church has utilized a lot. She's been teaching Enneagram for 10 years with them, 10 plus, and we are just so excited to welcome you here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So would you just give us a little bit of your backstory so that our listeners can get to know you a little better?
Absolutely. So I am a PK myself, and actually was a member at First Methodist when I was in 7th and 8th grade when my dad, Joe Stabile, was an associate here. And so it's been really awesome for my family to be here now, my husband and my 2 sons and I, to be back really at the exact age. My oldest son, Will, is in 7th grade. So he's joining youth at the exact time I did. So it's been this kind of surreal experience for me. Brought a lot of memories back, had a great experience here. So I've lived in the area always. Went away to a good Methodist college for school. I went to Hendrix College. Met my husband, Billy, there. I played tennis. He played baseball. And we're actually headed back later this month. He's being inducted into the Hall of Honor for baseball there, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, when I was in school, I was an English major, and everyone said, "Oh, you're going to teach." And I said, "Absolutely not. That's the last thing I want to do." I had come from a long line of preachers and teachers and coaches and had decided I wanted to conquer the corporate world, and was a business minor and worked in investments for 3 years out of college. And 3 years in really felt like I was making absolutely no difference in the world. Our minimum investment was about $5 million, and I just didn't feel like I was impacting much. In a roundabout, I think probably divinely ordained way, was approached to be the tennis coach at Bishop Dunn High School in Oak Cliff. And I did that, and literally the day that I left to do that full-time and teach, cut my salary in half and doubled my workload, and I had never been happier in my life. And have been in education since. So was at Bishop Dunn for 2 years, and then when John Paul II High School opened, again, not looking for anything, I was happy where I was. One of the coaches they hired suggested me. I was in the process of working on my master's in social work at UTA and just hadn't planned on it, and then it happened. So I've been there since the school opened in 2005. Taught for 5 years, coached the men's and women's tennis programs for 9, started that program there, and moved into admissions 8 years ago. So just in the last year have gone from director of admissions and financial aid to vice president of admissions, financial aid, and alumni. So have been doing that and in tandem teaching Enneagram for about 10 years now.
Full plate.
Yes.
Yeah. So for Enneagram, for those of us who don't know as much about it and have not been understanding and teaching Enneagram for as long, can you give us just a brief description of what the Enneagram is?
Sure. I always couch this with, you would think I've known it since I was 19. Mm-hmm. My mom is Suzanne Stabile, and so when she started learning and started teaching, she was using us as guinea pigs, right? So, and my husband Billy and I met at 19. So I've known the Enneagram for longer than I haven't. I'm 40 now. Mm-hmm. You would think I would have the perfect answer for that. And when people, I'll be somewhere teaching or something, and they're, what are you in town for? And I want to be able to give them this perfect answer to describe the Enneagram,
speech,
the elevator speech for the Enneagram. And I still don't have it. So here's my stab at it, you know.
Right.
Because what I want to say is this is a life-changing tool, essentially. It's 4,000 years old. And it's an oral tradition. In LTM, we honor it as an oral tradition. And what I love about it as a personality typing system that I think differentiates it from every other system I've come across, which are all helpful and useful for some point in your life. Most of those personality typing systems find you where you are based on your behavior, and it identifies you based on your behavior. Mm-hmm. Enneagram is the only tool I know that you identify with based on motivation. You can't, I don't believe, try to be a healthier or better person by just willing yourself to change your behavior if you haven't looked at why you're motivated to do the things you do. Mm-hmm. Enneagram is not static, and there's no end to the learning and growing. So I love it as a system to use for personal growth.
Awesome. So would you mind sharing with us what number you are on the Enneagram and what that means about how you perceive the world?
Absolutely. So I am an 8. 8s are known as, or typed usually as, the boss. We're no nonsense. We pretty much cut to the chase on everything. We have the most energy on the Enneagram and have a lot of intensity and lust for life. So we push everything and do everything. I mean, literally everything, 150%. And so as an 8, one of the things that I think sets us apart from other numbers as you're trying to learn about numbers, 8s are actually energized by conflict. I think we're the only number that is. Does it mean we seek it all the time? Absolutely not. But it is energy. I don't drink coffee. I don't like the taste, quite frankly. But observing or being in a little bit of conflict just gives me a jolt of energy.
Yeah, you don't need the coffee.
No.
So we've talked a little bit about how you're always doing, and so you fall in this triad that is all about doing, about being at work. So what are some of the strengths of that?
So for me, I am doing dominant, and it comes in really handy when you are in charge of growing enrollment for a new high school. When 86, even today, 14 years in, about 86% of our operating income comes from enrollment.
Wow.
So you want a doing dominant person in that role, probably. A lot's riding on that. I've got a lot of energy to give to that. But it's not just that. I have a lot of energy to give to my kids and to coaching and doing dominant. When we talk about, and as you guys teach the 3 centers, doing, thinking, and feeling, I do first, and I actually feel last. And, that comes out in a lot of areas. I was thinking about going to see my first grade niece play basketball. 8s even do that at 150%. So I was super aware. I was an athlete myself, basketball player. My mom, Suzanne, actually was the first head women's basketball coach at SMU after Title IX. Wow. So basketball, there's a lot in our family. And my brother, who played basketball, his daughter's playing. And I go to the game, and we're at PSA. And if anyone, had kids, once you have kids, if you're in this area, you probably do some sport through Plano Sports Authority. So you're in one of their huge gyms, and it's loud and crazy already because there's probably like 10 courts, just side by side by side. Right. And I was super aware, one of the last games I went to of hers, I found myself full on yelling, but not like at the ref or anything, but just at the girls. They're 5, to, hey, block out, hurry up, go get, block that pass off, get that girl, put your butt on her, block her out, And these girls are like looking at me with wide eyes, but I tell you, by the end of the game, they were like, okay, what do we do now?
What do we need to do?
And if they stole the ball or something, I'm going wild, right? She's not even my kid. But that 150% is every single thing we do. It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. No, I have a friend who is an 8, actually, who works on staff with us, and so I think he's okay if I tell the story. But anytime I need something, he's my first call. And so I ran out of gas.
I think this story is more embarrassing for you than it is for him. So
it
continue.
Is. Oh, 100%. He has held it over my head for a long time. I ran out of gas on 635 on the high 5. And so my pride would not let me call almost anyone. But I knew that my 8, my doer, Drew, would not only pick up the phone, he would be there the quickest, and he would get me back on the road safely. And I would have to deal with a little bit of heckling for him.
Definitely.
But if I said to him, Drew, I'm scared, I need you to come right now, he was going to be there.
He dropped whatever it was immediately.
He dropped dinner and was there within 10 minutes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My 8s are also the people that I just trust their instincts the most.
Yeah.
They're gut-centered, and they see, they go, they do, and 99.9% of the time, I think from a moral standpoint or anything else, it's just the right call to make, right? And so if I'm ever in a situation where I'm questioning, boy, this is a tough situation to figure out what's really the right plan of attack here, I can just look at an 8 and without blinking, they're like, well, clearly it's this one, go do that,
I'm glad you brought that up and talked about gut because, the doing triad is the gut triad, and there's really something to that. I mean, we are very intuitive as a number. 8s are very intuitive, and we trust ourselves. And so there isn't a lot of self-questioning. 9s are in the gut triad with us, but they're self-questioning. Where do I stand? Because they see both sides to things, right? And so growing up in the church, my dad, before and after his appointments here, he had some rural appointments as a lead minister. And my mom tells stories about, us going, and without fail, every time, she would say, well, there's this family, they wanted to bring us dinner or do this, or she would try and engage me and somehow with that family, and I would say, no, I don't have a good feeling. And she would say, Joey, they're, helping us. And I would say, no, something's off. And she said, literally without fail, every time it ended up being the church antagonist. And that they learned later to start trusting that. And if you want to know how young that starts, I was a breastfed baby for a long time. Breastfed babies don't spit up. And she says there are certain people that would hold me, and I would spit up on them, as a baby. Wow. As a baby. I think that whole gut-centered, trusting yourself intuitively happens early on for an 8.
Very early.
Yes.
Wow. So we've talked about the strengths of your number being an 8 and then the doing triad. What are the challenges, not only for an 8, but for those who are in the doing triad in 9 and 1 as well?
For sure, as an 8, it's I do first. And sometimes if I'm thinking just to support my doing, and if I feel at all, it's later, way after I've already done. So my doing and acting first without thinking actually can be pretty tricky. For my husband, Billy, who's a 9, the doing for him is he's actively doing a lot, but naturally 9s aren't good at prioritizing, and so it's not usually what he needs to be doing, and that's where it kind of gets him in trouble. And then for 1s, 1s, as you learn more about the Enneagram, you understand that 1s are the only number on the Enneagram who has an internal critic. We all have some self-talk, but 1s really have a critic they've lived with their whole lives, and that critic drives them to do a lot of what they're doing. Where it gets them into trouble is there's one right way in the mind of a 1 to do things. And if you're not doing it that way, then it's wrong.
Yeah, not just to do things, but do the right thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you mentioned your husband is a 9 and you're an 8, and so y'all are in the same triad, this gut triad. So what are some of the ways that y'all see that manifest, maybe even in your marriage between the two of you?
Oh, that's a great question. And one of my favorite stories to identify and illustrate how, although we're both gut-centered and we take in things that we experience internally first and we feel it literally in our gut, I love conflict, thrive on it. Billy Schewee as a 9 avoids it at all costs, hates it. He avoids conflict so much that if we went to a nice restaurant and Billy ordered a filet and they brought him sea bass, Billy Schewee is going to eat the sea bass.
Whether
and
he's
enjoy
allergic
it,
or not. Yeah.
And enjoy every bite.
And say thank you to the
yes,
waiter. And,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
And if I ordered the filet and you bring me the sea bass, it's not personal, but I'm paying for the filet, you're bringing me the filet, you know. So I say tongue-in-cheek, hypothetically, Billy and I pulling into, in the same car, pulling into the Target parking lot maybe. And it has nothing to do with us, but we are observing 2 cars go for the same parking spot. We both feel it immediately and internally. I get an immediate jolt of energy just observing the conflict. It is energizing for me. Billy feels physically nauseous. It has nothing to do with either one of us, but we both feel it internally, for sure, and in very different ways.
So how has your understanding of your number, your triad, the Enneagram in general, affected your personal relationships?
It's enhanced them / saved them. Honestly, it's hard to think about how I would be without the Enneagram since I've known it longer than I haven't, and I've known it since I was a teenager. Specifically, though, as I've grown older, we say that I'm doing dominant, and I mentioned that I'm feeling the least. So thinking supports my doing, and I feel the least. And there's a lot rolled into that for 8s. There's a vulnerability piece that's rolled into that. We trust very few. We don't like to let many people see our softer side, but it's not like we're walking around consciously hiding it. We just have really kind of pushed that down to do and make things go. What Enneagram has done, that knowledge, it softened me for sure as an 8. I think 8s are the most misunderstood number because we don't ever mean to intimidate people, and yet we do a lot, actually. And our intensity is often taken as anger. And it's not. We're just intense. We're just loud and strong and intense. And there's really very little. When we're angry, it's a whole nother level.
You'll know.
You'll know. There will be. And then it's over. Like for us, then it's really over. So I really believe that's where it comes to. I called my mom probably, 5, 6 years ago. And I said, the golden rule doesn't apply to me as an 8. I treat people exactly like I want to be treated. And what that means for me as an 8 is if you sugarcoat or beat around the bush or couch something that you're trying to say, I distrust you. I think you're trying to hide something. What I want is for you to shoot straight, give me all the facts. And so that's how I approach people.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work for 90% of people. My responsibility, once I knew the Enneagram, I can't sit back and say, well, that's me. Those are the ABCs of me as an 8. You got to work with it. It's to see that 90% of people don't do well with that. And it's my own personal growth and my own personal journey to work on softening how I come across, realizing that my intensity is often mistaken for anger.
I think one of the themes that we're seeing in talking to people about the Enneagram is it gives us an opportunity to really find wholeness in ourselves, to really identify and understand the things that are dominant in our lives, right? So for today's conversation, the hands piece, the doing piece, right? For Joey as an 8, Julie and I are 3s. So for us, the feeling is dominant, but also repressed in kind of a weird way that we'll talk about some other time. But then to also find the things that are repressed within us, to try to kind of draw those out and really find some balance across the 3. So that's so great to hear from you.
Yep.
So what about for your faith life? So the Enneagram can be completely separated from
Absolutely.
Spirituality or from faith, but for someone who is a person of faith, how has it affected your faith life?
It draws right on what I spoke about before, just about that vulnerability. I'm aware that some things that I say come across to people as, wow, she thinks she's all that. So when I say this, I am aware of how it sounds, and yet I'm still going to say it. 8s have a well-cultivated sense of being right.
That is true. That is 100% true.
And you remember what I said a
vouch
second
that.
ago, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what your point of view is, I think most of the time they are.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
That's why it's well cultivated. I mean,
Yeah.
we see without emotion. We're very quick processors. We're future oriented when we think. And so we've already kind of planned for that to happen and we're ready to do it. And we're not afraid to approach anyone to make it happen. And so when you live like that, people want to say that 8s are controlling. And I think there's really a nuance there that if you're not really familiar with the Enneagram, you need to pick up. And that is that 8s can control a situation pretty easily and often do. But 8s don't want to control you as an individual. People think because we're so strong and we come on so strong and we have an opinion and we say this is what needs to be done, that we're telling you you need to do that and we want to control you in doing that. When in fact, 8s would love it if you could handle your own business and do your job as well as I'm doing mine. I think 8s have a lot of expectations. So this is a long answer to get to my faith journey in saying that when you've got all of that on board, and people kind of expect you to make things go, no matter where you are in your life, there's not a lot of room for soft. There's not a lot of room for vulnerability. And it takes getting hurt. It takes being misunderstood, really. It takes some real pain that cuts to you. For an 8, it's probably going to look like coming in the form of an injustice that it affects you to stop and think a little bit and deal with that feeling that's cropping up, which has to do with vulnerability. So when it comes to doing that kind of work, that's been huge in my faith life because it is easy for me to control things. I live, and 8s, absolutely. I think 3s are probably the second number that lives in that illusion of control really well, which is pretty conflicting when you're working on a faith journey because you got to realize that you got to give that up, you know, that God's really the one in control. I couldn't get there in my head. It wasn't a head trip for me. I had to get there in my heart, and that had to do with bringing up some feeling, with allowing some vulnerability to see God really is in everything, and it transformed me for sure. I'm still strong. I'm still intense. I still live in the illusion of control for much of my life. When it comes to my faith journey, though, that softening has been pretty important.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago that you felt like 8s are potentially the most misunderstood number. Can you talk just a little bit more about that and maybe pass along some wisdom to your fellow 8s or just encouragement in that way?
Absolutely. So, you know, 8s have a piece when you start learning the Enneagram. There is this big betrayal piece that seems to be kind of hovering. And for years, as my mom would teach, she would say, you know, talk about that betrayal piece for 8s, talk about it. And I could never really give her much of a concrete answer because I thought, well, I'm only going to trust about 5 people enough to be betrayed, so I don't get it. I can't verbalize it. And then to speak to my point that you're always learning, there's never an end, you've never arrived on your Enneagram journey, about 3 or 4 years ago maybe, probably closer to 3, we were in a space and Mom was teaching it, and it really hit me, that betrayal piece. And I was able to finally verbalize it. And the verbalizing of it is, you know, I think I get betrayed daily, multiple times a day. And it happens when someone observes me interacting with someone else or just being me, or I have an interaction with them that in my mind is very casual, a casual exchange. And they make up an opinion about who I am. They bring a lot of feelings on board to support that, and they go off, and then usually they like to talk about that with other people. My whole life as an 8, I've been astonished to find out that people are talking about me, because I don't think relationally, so I'm not thinking about other people. So when I find that, it's always surprising to me. I was teaching in Houston at Ecclesia actually last October. There were probably about 9 or 10 8s in the room, and that really resonated what I said. And one of them raised their hand and they said, now what do you do then if one of those people who's betrayed you comes back to you? And I said, that's on us to do. That work is on our side then as the 8. And the next aha for me as an 8 was, I don't believe that 8s have a natural capacity for compassion or understanding for people who have been intimidated by us, because I don't know that 8s are really ever intimidated. And so that's been huge. Like to share with eights, you've got to make room for that person who you felt betrayed by, who made a decision about you. Because if they have the courage to come back, then that's pretty huge.
Oh, that's good. So, Joey, we have one last question that we ask every person that comes on the podcast, and that question is this. Up until this point in your life, what's one thing you wish someone would have told you?
Wow. Okay, I have that answer, and it makes me a little teary, actually, so that's a little vulnerability slipping in to this moment. But I wish someone could have told me early on and growing up that the person that I was as an 8, that everything that made me up as an 8 was going to be really wonderful for the people in my life one day.
Yeah, that it's not all negative and
Yeah,
it's not all these
not
just
all people taking you the wrong way and
Yeah.
being too much. You know, 8s get a lot. You're just too much. You're too much. You're too much. And there's an element to that, but once you start on a personal journey, all those really great parts of you are still there. You're just almost focusing them a little more, you know? I don't think anyone sets out to hurt other people, no matter your number. As a whole, as individuals, I don't know that we're trying to hurt others, but yet we get hurt by each other all the time. And what I love about the Enneagram is it gives you language for that can cut to things pretty quickly and promote understanding and compassion.
Well, thank you for your vulnerability in that and for being willing to share with us and remind us that we were all created perfectly in God's image, regardless as to our number, our dominant traits, our repressed traits. We are all God's children. That's a beautiful thing. So, Joey, thanks so much for sharing the time.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you later.
Okay.
What a fitting close to our series on head, heart, and hands that really brings us full circle through our label series, through our This Is My Story series, and through the head, heart, and hands series, reminding us to dig deeper in knowing people, to dig deeper in knowing their stories, to dig deeper in knowing the ways that they perceive the world, ways that they receive love and give love, and reminding us that although we have differences in those areas, there is value in each one of us, and that we're all deserving of love from each other and love from God.
If you enjoyed hearing from Joey today as much as we did, we have a great opportunity coming up with our own congregation at the beginning of January. Joey is going to be leading what is called a Know Your Number workshop. It is a great weekend workshop where she will go through all 9 numbers, all 9 personality types, and give us an in-depth understanding of the Enneagram. We will be giving more information about that workshop coming in January, so be on the lookout for that. We want to leave you today with a scripture that comes from Psalm 139 about that inescapable love of God. It says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and the light around me becomes night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for the darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made."
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of More Than Sunday. If you like the podcast, please feel free to share it, go online and leave a comment, or give us a rating so that others might hear about us. We've got a new episode coming out every Wednesday, so make sure you also subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or on YouTube so you don't miss our next episode. If you want to find out more about the Access community here at First United Methodist Church Richardson, you can find us online at accessfumcr.com, as well as on Facebook and Instagram. Special thanks to Joey Schewee for joining us this week. And make sure you tune in next Wednesday when we begin a new sermon series called Being the Church Richardson Needs. Have a great week.